The story of Joseph, one of the most inspiring narratives in the Bible, unfolds over 13 chapters in the book of Genesis, Genesis 37 to 50. It is a tale of betrayal, perseverance, and redemption that highlights God's sovereign hand in the lives of his people. Joseph's journey from a despised brother sold into slavery to becoming a powerful leader in Egypt demonstrates the power of faith, forgiveness, and God's unwavering purpose. Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob and the firstborn of Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife. This made Joseph particularly dear to his father, who openly showed his favor by giving Joseph a richly ornamented robe, often referred to as the coat of many colors. This favoritism bred jealousy among Joseph's brothers. Their resentment deepened when Joseph shared two dreams in which he symbolically ruled over them. In the first dream, their sheaves of grain bowed to his. In the second, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed before him. These dreams, interpreted as a prophecy of Joseph's future prominence, fueled their hatred. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were tending sheep in Dothan. Seeing Joseph from afar, the brothers conspired to kill him, calling him sarcastically, "This dreamer." Reuben, the eldest, intervened, suggesting they throw Joseph into a cistern instead, intending to rescue him later. However, while Reuben was away, the brothers sold Joseph to a caravan of Ishmaelite traders for 20 pieces of silver. They then dipped Joseph's coat in goat's blood and presented it to Jacob, deceiving him into believing Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. Jacob mourned bitterly, refusing to be comforted. Joseph was taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Despite his circumstances, Joseph remained faithful to God. Potiphar noticed Joseph's exceptional abilities and entrusted him with the management of his household. Under Joseph's stewardship, Potiphar's household flourished, as God blessed everything Joseph touched. However, Joseph's integrity was soon tested. Potiphar's wife repeatedly tried to seduce him, but Joseph consistently resisted, declaring, "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Genesis 39, verse 9. Her persistence eventually led her to falsely accuse Joseph of assaulting her. Potiphar, believing his wife, had Joseph thrown into prison. Even in prison, God's favor was upon Joseph. The prison warden noticed Joseph's diligence and trustworthiness, putting him in charge of the other prisoners. While there, Joseph interpreted the dreams of two fellow inmates, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. The cupbearer's dream foretold his restoration to Pharaoh's service, while the baker's dream predicted his execution. Joseph's interpretations came true, but the cupbearer forgot Joseph after being released, leaving him in prison for 2 more years. Pharaoh himself had troubling dreams that none of his magicians or wise men could interpret. The cupbearer, finally remembering Joseph, told Pharaoh about the young Hebrew prisoner who could interpret dreams. Joseph was summoned, and acknowledging that interpretations belonged to God, explained Pharaoh's dreams. He revealed that Egypt would experience 7 years of abundant harvests, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Joseph advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise man to oversee the collection and storage of surplus grain during the years of plenty to prepare for the famine. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom, Pharaoh appointed him as the second in command of Egypt, giving him authority over the entire land. At just 30 years old, Joseph went from being a prisoner to Pharaoh's right-hand man. Pharaoh gave Joseph an Egyptian name, Zephanath-Paneah, and married him to Asenath, the daughter of a priest. During the years of abundance, Joseph diligently oversaw the storage of grain. He also started a family, having 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, whose names reflected God's blessing and Joseph's deliverance from his hardships. When the famine struck, it affected not only Egypt, but also neighboring regions, including Canaan, where Joseph's family lived. Jacob, hearing that there was grain in Egypt, sent 10 of his sons to buy food, keeping Benjamin, the youngest, at home. When Joseph's brothers arrived, they did not recognize him, but he recognized them. Joseph tested their character by accusing them of being spies and demanding that they bring Benjamin to prove their honesty. He kept Simeon as a hostage and sent the others back with grain and the money they had brought to purchase it, secretly returned in their sacks. The brothers reluctantly returned to Egypt with Benjamin after the grain from their first trip ran out. Joseph, moved by the sight of his younger brother, hosted a feast for them, but continued his test. He planted his silver cup in Benjamin's sack and accused them of theft. When the cup was discovered, Joseph declared that Benjamin would remain as his slave while the others could return home. Judah, showing a transformation in character, offered himself as a substitute, pleading for Benjamin's release for the sake of their father. Overwhelmed with emotion, Joseph could no longer restrain himself. He revealed his identity to his brothers, saying, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" Genesis 45:3. The brothers were terrified, fearing retribution, but Joseph reassured them, "Do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Genesis 45:5. Joseph embraced his brothers, demonstrating profound forgiveness and acknowledging God's sovereignty in turning their evil into good. Joseph instructed his brothers to bring Jacob and their families to Egypt, promising to provide for them during the remaining years of famine. Pharaoh supported Joseph's plan, offering the best of the land of Egypt for Joseph's family. Jacob, initially hesitant, was overjoyed to learn that Joseph was alive and traveled to Egypt with his entire household. The reunion between Jacob and Joseph was deeply emotional, marking the restoration of a family torn apart by betrayal. Jacob and his family settled in Goshen, where they prospered under Joseph's care. Before Jacob's death, he blessed his sons and Joseph's two sons, elevating Manasseh and Ephraim to the status of his own sons, thus granting them a share in Israel's inheritance. Jacob's burial in Canaan fulfilled his final wish, reaffirming the family's connection to God's covenant promises. After Jacob's death, Joseph's brothers feared he might seek revenge. They offered themselves as his servants, but Joseph reassured them once again, saying, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Genesis 50:20. Joseph's words encapsulate the overarching theme of his life: God's providence working through human actions, both good and evil, to fulfill his purposes. Joseph lived to see his great-grandchildren and remained steadfast in his faith. Before his death, he reminded his family of God's promise to bring them back to the land of Canaan. He instructed them to carry his bones with them when God fulfilled his promise, a testament to his enduring trust in God's faithfulness. Joseph's story is a remarkable testament to the power of faith, forgiveness, and divine providence. Despite facing betrayal, false accusations, and years of suffering, Joseph remained steadfast in his trust in God. His life demonstrates that God can use even the darkest circumstances for his greater purposes, transforming pain into redemption and despair into hope. If Joseph's story has inspired you with its powerful lessons of faith and forgiveness, we invite you to explore more incredible biblical narratives with us. Subscribe to Bible Character Stories to discover how God's hand has moved through the lives of his people, shaping history and bringing hope to generations. Don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button and join us on this journey of faith and discovery.